Let's bring in the CBC senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong. He is in Washington for us. And Peter, you've written a story for our website that explores how the economies of the U.S. and Canada are faring since Donald Trump imposed his tariffs. Some people may be surprised by your findings. Tell us about it.
Yeah, look, I think people are surprised by the strength in both economies, and they're both so incredibly interlinked that it's important to sort of go through both of them. It's not one economy standing alone, right? So let's start with the U.S. economy that's holding up remarkably well. You know, because everybody said, Andrew, I probably went on your show and said, look, tariffs and trade wars, they're going to blow up the economy. They're going to spike inflation. They're going to slow growth. In short, they're going to be a disaster for everyone, not just the people that the tariffs are imposed on, but for the United States as well. But if you look around, stocks are at an all-time high. Jobs are holding up pretty well. The economy here in the United States is growing. And the big one that I think matters here is consumers. Consumers are spending, American consumers. They're confident. And that tells us, at least in part, how sheltered that they've been from the impact of tariffs. And there's two big drivers of that. One is a lack of counter tariffs, right? China and Canada are really the only ones who have taken steps to try to reimpose counter tariffs on the United States. And Canada's dropped a lot of those in the last 4 months. And then there's the fact that businesses just aren't passing on the entire cost, and in some cases, any of the cost of tariffs. And a good example of that is GM. You know, we know this in Canada, just how hard automakers have been clobbered by this. GM's profits fell by $1.1 billion last quarter. But then for a variety of reasons, political, economic, whatever you want to call it, GM hasn't been increasing prices. And that's not getting passed on to consumers. So it's not having that immediate effect that I think people had been expecting. And then if you scale back to Canada, and I'm going on a little bit long here, but it's important to sort of go through the two of them. The pain has been really focused and it's been really centralized around those specific industries that we keep talking about: auto, steel, aluminum, lumber. Aside from that, Canada's seen better than expected economic data. You know, if I had told you back in March that we were going to go through all this, the biggest upheaval in global trade that we've ever seen, and it would lead to a contraction of, you know, just 0.1% in April and maybe another 0.1% in May, I think you'd have taken that in a heartbeat. You know, the average effective tariff rate across the country could be as low as 2.3% because so much is covered by CUSMA and CUSMA compliance. So I think we're at this place where people, businesses, consumers on both sides of the border are just holding up a lot better than I think people would have thought.
All right. Things aren't as bad as many thought they might be, but can this last? I mean, everybody is sort of waiting for what may or may not happen by this Friday.
Yeah, sort of embedded in the first question was that notion, is this how things are, or is this just the impact of all of that economic turmoil has been delayed a little bit? And you know, I can sort of argue it both ways in my head. That on the one hand, we saw that huge surge of imports leading up to the tariffs, people front-running the tariffs, trying to get ahead of them and bring as much product into the United States ahead of the tariff imposition so they wouldn't have to pay the tariff. That led to a corresponding drop-off in exports in May and in June and a little bit in April as well. And so because of that, we've got these distortions in the economic data that are really hard to see through. We're going to get a ton of economic data here in the United States this week. We're getting jobs numbers on Friday. We're getting GDP numbers. We're getting PCE numbers, which are like an early indicator of inflation numbers. And a lot of those are going to tell us, are we just dealing with a new reality where maybe these won't have as big an impact as people had thought? Or is that impact coming and has just been delayed? And once it comes, it'll start to come in waves. We'll get a better picture of that by the end of this weekend.
Peter, thank you. CBC senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong live in Washington. And you can read Peter's analysis on our website. Just head to CBCNews.ca. You'll find Peter's article on the main page.